Today we're going to talk about stain and how it looks different on different types of wood. A lot of times you go to the hardware store and you find the perfect stain because the little sample looks exactly like what you want your finished piece to look like. But once you get it home and you put it on your piece, it doesn't look so good. That's because it's a different type of wood that they're using as their sample than what you're using for your product. Today, we're going to see how one stain looks different on 5 different pieces of wood so you can pick the right stain for your project. This is dark walnut stain. It's going to show the most difference in the types of wood because of the grainage that these different types of wood have. So I'm going to show you how it looks on each one of them. Always make sure you're doing this in a well-ventilated area because the stain most of the times is an oil-based stain, so it's going to have a strong odor to it, and you want to make sure you're in a well-ventilated area so you're not causing harm to your lungs. We're going to start on a piece of maple. This is dark walnut stain, and this is a piece of maple. You can see all the little discolorations in this because this is straight from the mill, and that's how the mill makes it. But if we spin it over, this side seems to be a little bit more finished grade, so it's going to stain up a little bit better than the other side. All right, so there is dark walnut on maple. Now we're going to move over to the red oak, which is pretty standard for hardwood floors. This has a lot of pores in it, so let's see how it looks on here. I would say this is probably a pretty close color to a lot of hardwood floors that you've seen. All right, now we're going to do dark walnut on white oak. You can see it's a lot more brown than the red oak. Dark walnut on birch. And I always suggest staining with the grain of the wood, so I'm doing this one opposite of the other pieces because the grain runs sideways on how this piece is cut. And then lastly, we're going to look at the poplar. So same color stain on 3 different types of wood, and even though it may have the majority of the same color hues to it, it's very, very different in how they stained up. In the oak, you're going to see a lot more of the grainage. It's going to absorb more in the grain, so the grain is going to be darker than anything else. Both the maple and the birch don't have hardly any strong graining, so it just kind of blends everything. This, you can still see some of the grainage in it, but it's a lot lighter on this one than any of the other ones. And then on the poplar, because of the variation in colors, there's a lot of variation of coloring in this piece. So next time you go to the store and you pick out your sample of stain that you want, make sure you are comparing apples to apples and that the sample that they show is the same kind of wood that you're using. Otherwise, you may ask them if you can just use a little bit on the piece of wood sample that you're bringing in of your own wood so that you can decide if you actually like the stain or not. Or you can just buy one of the little things before you buy the big quart of it and make sure you like it before you buy it. So what happens if you don't know what kind of wood your piece is made out of? Most of the time you can look at the grain pattern and you can compare online to different types, different species of wood to decide if you have maple, if you have birch. There might be a little confusion between the two because they have a lot of the same properties, but you're definitely going to be able to tell oak versus maple, poplar versus oak. The grain pattern's going to give it away, and that way you'll be able to decide how well the stain will soak up and absorb in the type of wood you have.